MegaPodtastic.
I'm here at the magazine rack, and I found two magazines I found interesting. This one's published by Entertainment Weekly, and it's called The Ultimate Guide to Captain Marvel. The other one is published by Hollywood Spotlight, and it's also called The Ultimate Guide to Captain Marvel. I flipped through these, and what I find very interesting is neither one of them, and keep in mind, these aren't published by Marvel Comics. If they were published by Marvel Comics, I would get it. They're made by independent publishers, and neither one of them mentions the character Shazam, and that's very interesting. This character, who we now know as Shazam, first appeared in comics in 1940, published by Fawcett Comics, and at the time, his name was Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel was a best-selling comic, and at times, he outsold Superman. Obviously, DC Comics did not like this, and there was a lawsuit. DC Comics sued Fawcett Comics for copyright infringement. They thought that Captain Marvel was just too similar to Superman. DC Comics won, and in 1953, Fawcett Comics stopped publishing Captain Marvel. Well, the name Captain Marvel, it fell into obscurity. No one was using it at that time. So, other companies started to pick up the name Captain Marvel. By 1966, the name Captain Marvel had been just sitting unused for a long period of time after Fawcett stopped publishing the character now known as Shazam. As a result, a publication company called MF Enterprises started publishing comics about this guy. He was an android who had the ability to disconnect his body parts. He only lasted 4 issues before he too was canceled. So 1 year later, Marvel Comics unveils this guy, and they called him Captain Marvel. And now Marvel Comics trademarks the name Captain Marvel, and this becomes Captain Marvel. It's just one little thing. In the early 1970s, DC Comics, you know, the same company that sued Fawcett over Captain Marvel in the 50s, they acquired the license to Captain Marvel. They bring him back. But now Marvel Comics owns the trademarks because of this guy. So DC brings this guy back. They cannot publish him under the title Captain Marvel. Now, the name of the character is still Captain Marvel. He's still Captain Marvel, but they can't use that name in a title because Marvel has trademarked it. So, starting in the 1970s, when DC gains the character, they start publishing him under the name Shazam. Now, that's just the title of the book, though. The book is called Shazam, but the character is still named Captain Marvel. Whereas this Captain Marvel never made it to the screen, this Captain Marvel did. In fact, to my generation, I'm in my early 40s. To my generation, when you hear the name Captain Marvel, this is the guy you think of. This is the guy you think of because he was all over television. He had a serial back in the 1940s called The Adventures of Captain Marvel. That was the first time he was on the screen. And at this time, there was no trademark on the name Captain Marvel from a competing comic company. So the serial, the first serial about this guy, was called The Adventures of Captain Marvel. That was the title. Then when DC got control of him, he came back to television in 2 TV series. In the early 70s, he starred on this show, Shazam. It was a weekly TV series that was very popular, led to a spin-off series called ISIS. So this show, it's kind of cheesy by today's standards, yes, but it was pretty big at the time.
In time of dire need, young Billy has been granted the power by the immortals to summon awesome forces at the utterance of a single word. Shazam! A word which transforms him in a flash into the mightiest of mortal beings, Captain Marvel.
By the way, this show was produced by Filmation, the animation people who do, He-Man, Fat Albert. This is a live-action show, but Filmation produced it. Well, Filmation held on to the rights to Captain Marvel Shazam, the Shazam version of Captain Marvel, and in the early 80s, they brought him back again as an animated series. It was part of a series called The Kids Super Power Hour with Shazam. Now, we've talked about this Captain Marvel, but this isn't even the Captain Marvel that's starring in the movie that's about to open. This was the original Marvel Comics Captain Marvel. The character that is Captain Marvel now is this character. And when she first appeared, her name was Miss Marvel. When I first read about her, she was a member of the Avengers, and her name was Warbird. So in my mind, when I see these characters, she will always be Warbird, and he will always be Captain Marvel. It's just hard to think of them otherwise. Oddly enough, in another strange twist of fate, these two characters are once again intrinsically linked because they have major motion pictures coming out, coincidentally, about a month apart. And that's odd. And it should be pointed out that these aren't the only Captain Marvels either. There were other Captain Marvels. In Marvel Comics, there was this one. And this one. And that's not all. For a while, DC Comics had their own other Captain Marvel. Freddie Freeman, who was known as Captain Marvel Jr., grew up and took on the mantle of Captain Marvel in a miniseries called The Trials of Shazam, and he became Captain Marvel. A lot of Captain Marvels. So that brings us back to these magazines. If they're going to call themselves the ultimate guide to Captain Marvel, shouldn't they really delve into the rich history of the name? I would think that the fact that another major character once had the same name would be part of the ultimate guide. Now, as I said, if these were published by Marvel Comics, I can understand why Marvel Comics wouldn't want to get into that. Why would they want to publish another company's hero? However, these are published by independent sources. In fact, this particular one does have a very, very, very small blurb about the original Captain Marvel, but it's pretty tiny. And this one has stories about other superheroes, specifically other female superheroes, and they don't shy away from getting into DC characters. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it seems to me that if you're going to call a book the ultimate guide to a certain character, you might want to get into the rich history of that character's name when that character has a name with such a long, extensive history. But that's just my opinion. Keep wearing those pajamas.
Keep wearing those pajamas with the plastic feet. Keep wearing those pajamas. Tell everyone you meet. Keep wearing those pajamas with the back door flap. Keep wearing those pajamas. Don't open, it's a trap. Oh no, it's a trap. Some people call them PJs, some people call them jammies. They can come embroidered with big money and no whammies. They can have 100 tiny commander Adamas, but no matter how they look, just keep on wearing those pajamas. Keep on wearing those pajamas. Keep wearing those pajamas. I know we're having fun. Keep wearing those pajamas. And now the song is done.